Before the season, as we well remember, most of the talk about the team was more than just negative. After a 4-1 start, some people were talking about making it to the conference championship game, which wasn't going to happen, isn't going to happen. I like the team, but they're working on a razor-thin edge right now. A couple of things go wrong, they lose. A couple of things go right, they win. And we are coming down to the final stretch for the season. And I have a cat. Okay, we're coming down to the stretch run. And while I really don't believe they'll make it to the conference championship, I do think they have a decent chance to finish 7 or 8 wins, maybe 9. Not completely out of reach, just not likely. I think 8, pretty decent chance. But I also thought it was a good time to take a closer look at just where we stand at this point. Starting today with the defense. Bandit, Jarrett Bartlett just can't seem to get over the hump to be consistent. He has his moments. The UCF game was not one of them. His PFF score was the worst of the season. He did get one pressure, which is something, of course, we've not been getting enough of from any source. But he has to bounce back from the UCF game. Now, Coach Brown talked about the Bandits not setting the edge, leaving the gap too wide right off tackle. Can't have that. Can't have him crashing too sharp an angle at a bad time. He has been prone to going back and forth instead of finding that proper spot. We'll see. He doesn't have to play great for West Virginia to win, but he needs to be solid. Bradley, it's more reasonable that he's been kind of up and down because it's his first year in the system. His grades have been mixed all year. His tackling grade against UCF was the worst of the season. No pressure, no tackles listed. He did get 2 assists. So the Bandits, and this Coach Brown has talked about this, both Bandits have to do better. And again, we need solid performances. We don't need great. Great would help. Great would be great. But good should be enough. Do the assignment. Hurd continues to improve. He's not ready to play a lot. Not until next year. More weight, more strength, the usual things for a freshman. He could see time on defense these last 4 games, or 3 of the 4. More likely to be special teams, but it would be interesting to see him as the Bandit at least a little bit. And certainly wouldn't hurt if it created a spark. Defensive line is sort of the mystery of the season. A lot of people didn't expect them to be good, so the first few games were a big, pleasant surprise. I wasn't surprised. I knew that playing assignment football and playing hard could do the trick. Suddenly, not as good. That's been an unpleasant surprise. And I am surprised by that. I didn't necessarily think they could play that extra gear all season to have that really high emotional range and focus that that pushed them harder. But I thought they would continue to play hard assignment football. And that doesn't seem to have been the case. It was better in some ways against UCF, not good enough. Now, Sean Martin, his PFF grades down across the board the last two games. Seriously down. 0 pressures. We've seen him down for short periods, several different games. I don't know if he's banged up enough that it is really affecting his performance somehow. And I know that's something the coaches wouldn't necessarily want to tip off. Maybe something that's not enough to keep him out, but enough to slow him down. That's a problem. We need him at full Sean Martin speed. Now, as an additional note, I do not expect Martin to go to the NFL this year. Next year, yeah. This year, I think he would be a free agent, especially with the slip in performance. Even if he finishes strong, I don't think he's ready. I don't think scouts would tell him he's ready. But we need him this week, this season, to step up at least close to the form he showed early in the season. Mike Lockhart, his grades have remained steady, but no pressures, and in many respects more than just not getting pressure. We are not seeing the line getting push, where we are at least holding the offensive line in place or pushing them back slightly enough to cut lanes, even if you're not getting pressure on the quarterback. We're losing ground instead of gaining ground. That has to stop. Again, of course, tired shouldn't be part of it because they're rotating quite a bit. But we've got to get an edge. Now, I will when we get to linebackers, I'll get to a little more too of why I think the line may be having some issues. But Vestorinen, yeah, they call him Steady Eddie, and there's a reason for it. His PFF grades, his performances have been consistent, except for tackling against UCF. His score was bad. Of course, it was a bad game first half for almost everybody on the defense. And of course, Vestorinen will every now and then, get a big play, tackle for loss, sack, something like that. He is currently the most consistent, solid player on the line. Mulba has been largely, solid. He's doing what he's asked to do. His playing time has been increasing. His tackling against UCF was off. But, he should be one of the positives in the late run. Hawkins, his number of plays have been going up. Had the highest snap count of the season against UCF. But grades have been a bit lower, and the tackling against UCF a whole lot lower. He's only had 2 pressures all season. He hasn't been bad, but he hasn't provided the spark that it looked like he was going to provide. I don't know what happened. And of course, again, with a lot of these guys, if they have tweaked something enough to slow them down a bit, the coaches aren't going to tell us unless they are directly asked. So far, Brown has been very forthcoming when asked. The media isn't asking. I don't know if he's said that he doesn't want them to ask too much, but there's a whole lot of obvious questions. The West Virginia media is just, I don't know if they're being polite and ignoring them, or if they are just ignoring them because they're not seeing the obvious. I am perturbed. And some would also say perturbing. Thornton has been coming on. He also played his most snaps against UCF. Grades have been so-so. The tackling against UCF again for him wasn't good. But the coaches did say overall it was his best game. He did get, the fumble recovery, which also meant he was back there. He had one pressure against UCF, but he has not really been a big pressure guy the whole season. Of course, that could change. If he's starting to crank up, this is a good time for it. And in some respects, it may well be the guys who've been rotating in and are starting to increase their playing time who also have something in the tank to really crank it up an extra level. And if they're playing against an offensive lineman who has been worn down more during the season, we could see some of these, guys rotating in cut loose a little more. Durajaye, he's had his two worst games against Houston and UCF. But his tackling score has been steady. He has not gotten many pressures in the last two games. And that was something, his quickness was an advantage. He's young. He's still a little light. His conditioning may still need another year. So I am not worried about Durajaye, but we could really use him to crank it back up and hit some gaps hard and fast and make sure it's the right gap. He is a guy that I do hope will have a couple of really good games to finish the season. Sonny Redwood came back, has been playing sparingly, and of course that is to be expected. He came back from his injury faster than expected, but you do not want to wear him out or risk, a new injury or repeating the old one. But performance has been relatively mediocre. You aren't really hearing his name when he's in. Of course, that's also because the announcers, regardless of which network the team is on, the announcers have been pretty much crap. I do think it's partly because they don't have enough spotters, but they have not been particularly good at letting us know who's in the game and who's doing what, unless they get a penalty or an injury. Let's see here. Redwood would have been expected to get more pressure. He has not been doing so. That's a bit of a disappointment. Russell, still only playing a handful of snaps per game, but is starting to make more of a push. So he is also one of the guys that we could see make a difference down the stretch. He is peaking, but how many snaps can he play? And he still doesn't necessarily have the full variety of game that you want. Lockhart is still the most versatile at that position. Simmons he was, one of the guys in fall camp. Other players were talking about Simmons as hardest worker, most improved, really going to do things, and he has disappeared from, the stat sheet. He's on the roster. He's there. He played against Duquesne and Oklahoma State. I didn't check to see what he's doing on special teams, but in terms of the defense, he has not been the factor that was hoped. I don't know if there's any chance of him coming in and doing something at this point, or if somehow either the work never quite translated, or if he slipped in his work ethic. So, on the line, McIntyre and Fisher are guys who could still see some playing time. They are more likely to play on special teams, but they might come in some here in the last 4 games, get them some experience, see what they can do. Fisher, of course, is still too light, but he might get some spot playing time. Zeke Lawton, again, I don't know what happened. He was injured for a while, came back from the injury, but we have just not really seen him on defense. Of course, we're already rotating 9 guys, so you're not going to see everybody, but he is a guy who was expected to make more of a difference along the way. Linebackers and Spear. Lee Koba, through most of the season, his PFF grades were pretty low, which was surprising each week because if you watched the game, you could see that he was doing a lot. And general thinking was that the PFF graders were judging him on things that he was not supposed to be doing. They thought he was supposed to be doing something he wasn't, and he was doing what he was supposed to do, so the grades were skewed. Now, this past week, he had his highest grade since, I think, the Pitt game or the Penn State game. Very good to see. May well be that he and Cutter are starting to get a better feeling for playing together, because it's not just playing your spot. You do really have to play together, and that can take some time. They were on the field together, I'm sure, some during camp, during practice, but they were not going to be on the field at the same time a lot during that time. So now I think they may just feel more comfortable and have a higher trust factor. Kind of surprising, Koba's sack against UCF was only the 2nd listed on PFF for the season. I would have thought he would have a lot more, but I'll also get to that here in a few minutes, something else I noticed. But, Koba has been getting a lot of tackles and assists every game. That's, he has been key to tackling. And by intent or not, the linebackers have been key to tackling, even more so than the linemen. Cutter got his best grades by far in the UCF game, and that's promising. We need him to continue that the rest of the season, but I'm sure other teams are going to focus on him and try to get him out of position. Does the UCF game indicate that he's not going to cooperate with their desires. He has also been getting a lot of tackles, not so much the pressures. He's only had one pressure since he started playing regularly. Caden Beiser is fairly low scores, but he's had one pressure, 3 tackles in limited playing. So he is filling the role, fairly well that he needs to fill to at least be able to give one of the other guys a break. And that this last time around, it was Cutter who's getting a rest. Koba has to be able to play, these last 4 games at a high level. It's his last 4 college games plus hopefully a playoff game, or a bowl game. A playoff game we'll hope for maybe next year. But I think the fact that it is, he sees the end of his college career coming may give him, that extra level to, because these last 4 games actually will, in many ways, determine his West Virginia legacy, how we remember him. So I think that will affect his play, hopefully improve his play. Austin Cave. What the heck is going on with Austin Cave? That's one of the questions the media isn't asking. He's dressing now. He's practicing. Is he going to play? Will he be able to play enough to help the linebacking squad? I don't know. We need him. We need him to play at least as well as Beiser. Now, Austin Cave should be a better linebacker than Beiser. But whatever the injury was, wherever he is in his conditioning and timing at this point, we need him to be at least as good as Beiser. We may find out something more at the Kegler show Friday. We'll see. And Favris, essentially the same. Favris needs to play and needs to play at least as well as Beiser. As long as we have guys who can give our starters a break, that will help. Now, what I think is a key, looking at Lathan, he was the one getting the pressures. I thought it was really him and Koba. I don't know if it's just that Koba was not getting credit for some of the pressures. I don't really remember seeing him getting that much pressure. But Lathan was getting multiple pressures every game, plus about as many tackles as Koba. That is what we have not been able to replace. Cutter, in overall talent, Cutter is probably on the same level as Lathan, or at least in that range. Either through what his particular talents are, or just experience, or level of trust from the coaches, he's not getting the kind of pressure that Lathan was. And nobody has replaced that. But I think, not bringing and getting that extra pressure is also part of why the line is not getting pressure. Again, it's a team. It's all interactive. The line sees some linebacker coming and has to try to block him. A lineman gets a better path to the quarterback. If you can bring pressure from various places, it helps everybody bring pressure. but we do not have the level of experience to risk it. Now, there's been pressure, but it is a lot more selective when they bring it. Maybe with Cutter playing better, if he's consistent with that, they will feel comfortable bringing more pressure. But losing Lathan, I really think, is the pressure key. We have to find ways to get enough, which again, they did, particularly second half against UCF. The pressure tended to be a little late in the first half, and that's when pressure causes problems for the defense instead of the offense. But Lathan, in many respects, was more critical in the pressure than I actually realized. Now, Lance Dixon, I think we can consider him gone. Gone for the season, probably gone for good. In terms of how it affects the team, he would come on at times, but he was not consistent. He was good. He never fulfilled what should have been his potential. Now, in terms of team chemistry and psychology, he may have been a drag on the team. I don't know. So some aspects in that regard may be better. I don't know why he's gone, what he did, what he said or didn't say or wouldn't do after, he got in trouble. So, originally Brown said he was suspended, for one game, and it was wait and see. Well, it's extended to 2 games, and I think we've seen. I think maybe either Dixon said he didn't care enough to fix the problem, or the coaches said they had had enough. I may be wrong. Wouldn't be the first time. We'll see. McLaren has been the starting spear. He has been steadily good. Has issues here and there, but he's been a solid, above average performer. And he should be back. If he is back and can play out the season, that's going to help a lot. Not having him and doing as well as they did the second half against the UCF was actually relatively impressive. So, with luck, we get McLaren back. He'll be backed up by Collins and sometimes Floyd. And Collins did fairly well against UCF. It was his first significant playing time this season. His coverage was a little iffy. His tackling was better than most of the other people on the defense. And he had 4 tackles, so he was active. And that's one thing we saw with Collins last season was he finds the ball. Collins has bounced around in his short time at West Virginia. He came in more as the weight for a safety, but they thought they could eventually put the weight on him to be a linebacker. As things stand at the linebacker position for next year, he might be better off staying at the spear. He may be a lot more useful and, better suited. We'll see how that plays out. But he looks to be a long-term asset. Right now, he just has to be good enough to get us through the next 4 games. If he plays as well as he did in this game, that will help. I'm including Marcus Floyd in the spear category, although he bounces between there and the safety. Including, he's not a natural spear, but something of a spear nickel, general back. Not really a safety either. And his grades have actually been down significantly since Pitt and TCU. And of course, TCU is his big game, where they discovered what it seems maybe his best talents are, with a knack for blitzing and moving around, being used in a variety of ways. It worked. Now, of course, teams know we've done it, but we haven't really done it since because of the injury to Lathan. You take Lathan's experience out of the equation, and you really can't play with the defense in the same way. You can't start moving guys around, letting them play free when you've got somebody in there who is really just trying to get a grip on playing Power 5 defense. As Cutter gets better, they may be able to use Floyd more in the way that seems to work. He's an asset to the team any way you look at it. His tackling was better against UCF than than the other safeties. But he's such a betweener somehow that he needs a special spot. And they found it, lost it, have to find a way to remake it. And if they can use Floyd in the creative ways that they were working with, that could be the difference in how many games the team wins. Now, corners and safeties. Beanie Bishop had 2 really bad games, or pretty bad games, against Houston and Oklahoma State. Bounced back up close to where he had been against UCF, except for tackling. He, like a lot of the guys, had several missed tackles. He is going to be a major key to how many games we win out of the next 4. If he slips back to the Houston, Oklahoma State level, it's going to cost one. When he plays at that level, the odds are we lose. Kept it close, almost won both of them, but lost. So he has 4 games that he has to just lay it all on the line. If he plays as well as he did in the first few games, plus catching the interceptions, then we probably win at least 3 out of the 4 games. We'll see. He has definitely been a key to the season, and a huge pickup, especially with 2 of the other portal transfers going out early for the season. Ruffin, on the other side, is sort of the defensive back version of Vesterinen. He has been the steadiest of all the corners and safeties. Bishop has at times been better, but he has at times been worse. Ruffin, he makes mistakes. You have to make mistakes as a corner, or you're not, risking enough. But he has really been solid. Not a shutdown corner, but knowing that you can count on him helps a lot. Now, Spells played more against UCF than he had at any time in the season, and he played better than he had any time in the season. He's starting to be the player we kind of expected at the beginning of the season. I'm not quite sure what got in the way, but maybe we are getting there. Now, part of the time that means giving Ruffin a rest. Part of the time it means moving Ruffin to safety to give one of the safeties a rest. Either way, being able to rest these guys matters. So if we can get 20, 25 quality downs from Spells, that, that's another thing that could decide one or more of these games. So let us hope for that. Safeties. Burks has been a little bit erratic. At times he has been the guy we expected. At times he has, I think, overplayed, trying too hard to be the guy we expected. His tackling has been up and down. It's got to improve. Of course, the way they tackled the first half against UCF, just about everybody has to improve over that, which they did in the second half. If we played the season like we did the second half against UCF, we're good. If we play it like we did the first half, we're in trouble. Okay. Burks still has a lot of room to improve, which also I'd say the plus side for next year, I don't expect him to try for the NFL. I think it would be a very bad decision. He would probably sign as a free agent just because of his potential, but I don't think he would get drafted. But he also seems to have done a good job calling the defense and getting guys in position. That's a big thing we didn't have last season, and it has made a difference. So even when his game is a bit off, his influence is critical. Anthony Wilson has definitely been a positive. His tackling the last two games has been pretty poor, which is a surprise because he was brought in largely due to his tackling. That has to get corrected. I believe it will get corrected. I'm not quite sure why, it's happened. But he's a good safety, a strong influence, and if he tackles well, the defense is significantly better, definitely improves the chances of winning. But I expect to see him do better. Now, there are a fairly large number of factors that are going to affect the next 4 games. A handful are ones that on their own could decide the wins and losses. But, we all know have to find a way to get more pressure or at least to get there when we bring pressure. Leslie, I think, has been doing the best, that he can with what's on the field as far as when to bring pressure and how to bring it. Worked better, again, so many things worked better in the second half at UCF than they did in the first half, which is, again, adjustment. Have to find a way to make it work. And I don't want to put pressure on Cutter, and I'm not putting pressure on Cutter because I don't think he's watching or will hear about this video. But a lot is going to revolve around what he can do and what the coaches believe he can do. If he and Kobo really are working better together and can kind of play loose and free and trust each other, and the coaches start to let them go more, especially if Cutter can start to bring any part of the pressure that Lathan did, in much better shape. A lot is going to revolve around Cutter. Don't like that much on one player, but there it is. Okay, thanks for watching. For those of you who made it this far, I know it's a long video. I will be doing one for the offense, which will also be a long video. I hope you'll watch that one as well. And I will talk to you later. So long.